Today I'm going to be reading A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This was recommended to me by my sister, and so my expectations are pretty good because I trust her in terms of like books, because she's not really a big reader, but she really liked this book, so that automatically gives me a good sign for it. For my understanding of like the synopsis here, it's basically about an architecture student who's always been having this dream about like the fairykin, like forever, and she has like this favorite author of hers that she's obsessed with, and his house I think goes up for sale or something, and she and like a rival architecture student are kind of like going through it together, and there's probably gonna be some romance there, I imagine, because it seems like the rivals to lovers kind of thing, which is like always super nice for me. I love that stuff. And so I think it's gonna be kind of dark, and I think that it's gonna be written in a very like whimsical way. That's kind of like my expectations going into it. So let's crack the book open and find out what it's all about. First things first, this dust cover has to go. I hate dust covers. Like, I'll put it back after I'm reading it, but I always take it off. Let's see what the book looks like. Sometimes underneath dust cover, like in the Shadow and Bone series, there's like little designs on here, but it doesn't seem like there's any on here, but that's okay. So now the dust cover is gone, we can actually crack the book open and read. So we're about halfway through A Study in Drowning, and here are my thoughts so far. I think that the universe that's like kind of weaved into this is really well done and well thought out. There's like two different countries and they kind of hate each other. One really believes in like myths and fairy tales, and the other one thinks it's all fiction. And so I think that that's pretty cool. And like there's the weaving in of like the fairykin and how the main character's always been dreaming of him, and about this really famous book that's always been the main character's favorite, and the author passes away, and so she kind of gets this opportunity to go to his like estate and redesign it for an architecture project that she ended up winning. And while she's there, there's another literature student there, and she doesn't like him because she wanted to study literature, but in this world, like, women aren't allowed to. Like, she was lucky to even study architecture, but like literature, like they say, like a woman's mind isn't built for that kind of thing. It can't think complexities and stuff. And so obviously she's like, that's her dream. And so there's this guy who's like living the dream for her. So she kind of like hates him because of that, because she wants to be able to study what she actually cares about instead of just what she's able to do because she's a woman. So I really liked like the feminist themes within it, and like showing that she's smart and like the rules are really old and stuff. Like, she's smart enough and she's probably the best person to do a thesis or anything related to this author, because she's literally his biggest fan and she can recite all of his work, even in like the really not well-known stuff, like some really old poems. And so it's just kind of following along like her and this guy and the mysteries of like the author and his estate and his mysterious son and widow who lived there. You haven't never seen the widow, but she invited the literature student, and then the son invited the main character. So there's some interesting stuff going on, and the main character does look exactly like the kind of woman the fairykin like kind of was with in the story. That's like the main kind of like the story within the story. I will have to say though that there are some trigger warnings for this book. There are mentions of SA, and there are also mentions of like hallucinations and stuff. And so I just wanted to put that out there as like a potential trigger warning for everybody, anybody who's interested in reading this. Like, those things are mentioned. And so just want to let you know about that. I think what is kind of really unique about the main character is that she's kind of like a blubbering mess, and like really relatable in terms of like the level of anxiety that she has. Like, she's not completely stable. She's got really bad anxiety, like bad stuff has happened to her, and like she sees things that people think aren't there, which in my humble opinion, I'm pretty sure they do exist, and they're just trying to, like, because they don't believe in like the myths and stuff, and they think it's all fiction, that's why they put her on this medication so she doesn't see that stuff. But I think that's an interesting take as well. Like they think that she's like this mentally ill person, and I mean, anxiety and stuff, yes, but I don't think the stuff that she's seeing is in her mind. I think that it's real. I have been reading this book a lot slower than like usual, and I don't know if it's because maybe I'm in a bit of a reading slump after finishing Emily Wilde, because like that book was incredible, and sometimes when you read a really incredible book, all books other kind of like pale in comparison. And so maybe that's it, or maybe the book's a little bit slow, but it's not a bad book. I'm just having a little bit trouble just like sitting there and reading it, but I'm pretty sure it's just like the reading slump. But because like it's not a bad book, like it's interesting, so I'm like curious to see where it goes. And I think the writing's pretty good too. Like I can smell the ocean, and like the way that they describe the ocean and like the whole kind of world, like it's definitely well written. So I'm gonna continue and read, and I will update you when I take my next break. So I just finished Ava Reid's young adult debut, A Study in Drowning, and so here are some of my thoughts about the book. I think that the writing was really well done. I think that the author really knows how to write. The way that she describes things, you can really see and smell and taste it. I think that the world building was like, I like the universe that it was in, how it was like kind of like our world, but also like not kind of like our world. I think that the book had good themes. There was like focus on like trauma and anxiety, hallucination, like feminism, like men being kind of misogynist and all that. So I think there's a lot of good elements, and I really like that the main character was like, with like, I don't want this to sound like mean, but it made her more complex because of the trauma that she went through and continued to go through, and how it kind of follows like how her past, and there was like a bunch of stuff in there, like with her mom and her childhood and that jerk, all the people at her school, like the misogyny. So there was a lot of complexities like and issues with the character, and you kind of watch her develop towards the end. However, the rest of the story I think falls pretty flat. I think that the love interest, he's pretty plain. He could really be anybody. Like he didn't really have a lot going on with him. Like he's smart and he's nice, but there's not really any depth to him. Like we had a bit of a backstory about like his dad, but I don't know. I really just wasn't feeling it. He just felt like some guy, unfortunately. And they didn't have any chemistry. Like he and Effy, they didn't really have any chemistry. I wasn't really rooting for them. But sometimes like you see that, it's just like kind of a romance. But I don't know. I didn't really feel it. Like I'm not against them being together, but I don't know. It just didn't feel like the buildup wasn't very good in my opinion. And despite the beautiful writing and the wonderful world that the characters are in and all the potential for these characters, I feel like the plot felt very flat. Like there wasn't a sense of urgency. I didn't really know why the characters were doing things they were doing. Like, it's like, oh, this guy's like, is he a fraud? No, I love him. Well, let's find out if he's a fraud. And she's like, okay. And it like really stressed me out that she wasn't doing the architecture stuff she promised. I don't know if that was just me, but like that just stressed me out to the max. It's like she would just kind of go in this other way, and they were just kind of doing stuff, and it would just lead to another scene, and then they would do stuff, and then it would lead to another scene, which was disappointing because I was like, what is happening? Like there felt like there's a bunch of different stories happening at the same time as well, because it was like a book within a book, and there were all of these characters and they just did stuff, but they didn't really have a reason to do stuff, in my opinion. The only time where I really felt like, oh, okay, yeah, I really want to continue reading this was towards the end. And so right after like the climax, like that part, that's when the book got really interesting to me. And I was like, oh, like this is really fun. Like there's an urgency, and the main character, like she has that development that's been working on. Like I really like that, and I was rooting for her then. But I think if the whole book was able to encapsulate that, it would have been much better. And I also didn't find the book surprising at all. Like the foreshadowing was really obvious. Like the two big reveals, I guess them as soon as like the first chapter or two when you're introduced to certain characters. So it was really predictable, but not really in like a fun way. And this makes me feel bad and guilty because like my sister recommended this book. She really liked it. I know there was a lot of hype for this book, and the author can write, like beautiful writing, gorgeous, like just like gorgeous, but the plot just didn't do it for me. I think that there's a lot of potential in this book, and I think this author has a lot of potential as well. And this is just like, this is her first young adult debut, so I'm sure that it's going to be better as like the author continues. So I think that the author will do great things in the future. I just think that this book fell a little bit flat in the terms of, from a reader perspective, I did not care about the characters. I didn't care about the story. I didn't know what was happening half the time. Like, sure, it was like well written, but again, there was no sense of urgency or really like plot. It was very like face value. So my overall rating for A Study in Drowning, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I was debating between 2.5 and 3, but I'm gonna give it 3 because the writing is great. There are some really good elements and good themes like throughout the story, especially like crushing misogyny, which I really like that. But it's lacking in a lot of other areas like predictability, plot, character development, like pretty much everything else that should make a story more complex. The story has a lot of potential. The author, again, definitely knows how to write, and I'm sure in the next few years, like when she starts to write more and get more experience, we're gonna see some really good young adult content. I would love to see her write adult content because I feel like maybe she feels a little bit stuck in young adult, because you know, there's like some constraints, some kind of areas like borders that you can't cross when you're writing young adult content, but the kind of writing she has, I think she would flourish a lot more writing adult content. And I think that that will kind of like, we'll see some really great things if that is the case. We'll see if I'm right. So thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. That way you get notified anytime a new video comes out. I make a lot of reading videos, reading vlogs, book reviews, all that good stuff. So if you're into that, don't forget to subscribe and comment down below, what book do you really, really love that you want me to read? I love to read people's favorite books, even if I don't end up liking them in the end, like what kind of happened here. But I still love reading them because I think that it has like a piece of a person in it and like what they relate to and what they like. So I think that's cool. So please comment down below your favorite book or book you'd like me to read, and I will add it to my ever-growing list of 2024 books. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!